Hi everyone, welcome to Anthony's Hobby Corner, and on today's video I want to share with you a little project I've been working on the side, and that was to build a homemade track cleaning car. And the reason I wanted to build a homemade or customized track cleaning car was because I realized that from the commercially available track cleaning cars by various manufacturers, they all utilized proprietary pads for cleaning, and they all have various different techniques. For example, this is a track cleaning car, EC1 by Bachmann, and if you notice, it actually takes a special elongated pad that goes in between here. And it didn't really blend with your consist. You had to run this separately. This one here is by Fleischmann, and you can see that this one has two rotating pads driven by a rubber band that is driven by the axles on both ends. Again, requires special customized pads, and they can get kind of pricey if you are running these track cleaners often on your track. So either way, I figured let's see if I can come up with something that would meet certain criteria. So let me share the criteria with you. So the objectives I wanted to achieve in making a homemade track cleaning car was to make sure that the pads that I would use would be easily attainable and cost effective. It would blend with your train consist, so it could be run anytime. The pads could be easily replaced without difficulty, and we'll get maximum utilization from the pads, and it would perhaps take any type of chemical you can put on it. Okay, so, and obviously easy to use, and I also wanted to make sure that they were safe when they run over switches and points, and then don't damage your moving rails on your switches and points. So I realized that I wanted to build something that utilized a sled, because I felt that a sled was the best option. I did a lot of experimentation, and so I ended up with a prototype, just using wood and some screws, and this was the base of the design. And this sled would actually run on the rails, and it would actually run on pads that would place in these slots. Now, why did I have slots that go lengthwise? Because I felt it provided the best coverage and area in as it slides in the track to clean the rails, as opposed to the pads that go across orthogonal to the rails. So that was the design for this simple little sled that I found to be very effective in cleaning the tracks. Now, one of the design requirements for me was to make sure that these cleaning pads always remain on the rails, right? And so my first design was to use one of these easily available North American reefers or refrigerator cars, or a freight car, and these actually have two pivoting trucks with 4 axles. But the problem with this is that if you use any kind of a North American type freight car, because they actually have the pivoting trucks, what happens is that whenever these cars go on a curved piece of track, you'll notice that the sled will move out of radius, right, and move out of the frame. And as a result, it will not clean your rails appropriately. And same goes for the other direction, because your trucks are pivoting to accommodate the curvature of the track. And that's when I decided to ditch the old option of using a North American freight car, and I decided to use a European freight car. So the beauty about a European freight car is that these freight cars actually have just 2 axles, and they don't pivot. They're fixed solid to your chassis of the freight car. So On straight tracks, obviously, it lines up well, but even on a curved track, because they also have a very short wheelbase, not as wide as your North American trucks, they would, even on a curve, they will remain, at least the center of the body would remain on the rails, and they would not move out from the rails as much. And this proved to be very successful as I tried it on my layout. So this is why I decided to build the homemade track cleaner on a European freight car, or a goods wagon, is what they call them. So since I've decided on the type of car that I'm going to use, a European freight car, I've tested my prototype sled and I know that it works pretty well. I decided to use a CAD software and get a 3D printed plastic sled created. And that's what you see in front of you right now. And so I got a few of them made. I made some through the SLA technique and some through the resin technique. And they came out pretty well. Now, a key piece of the design is a floating suspension or a floating sled. And what I mean by that is there are many designs out there that people have put in place, making their own homemade cleaning cars, where the pads are fixed to the chassis of your car, and so it will put too much pressure on your track, and sometimes when you're going over switches and points, you could actually harm those center rails on your switches. So the key that I wanted to make sure is I wanted to design something that would actually float and would just put just the right amount of pressure on your rails. And so that's why I came up with this concept where the sled would actually float in and out as required, based on based on the terrain that is going over. Now, the beauty about this too is if you have track that is going through various elevations, this sled will actually accommodate that. So the next part of the design was to make sure that there was sufficient pressure on the track as it was cleaning, as the sled cleaned the track. Now, having it run on it under its own weight was sufficient enough, I noticed, as I did some trial runs. But what I wanted to go a step further. So I decided to introduce a couple of springs between the sled and the chassis. Just bear with me as I put the springs in place. And so these are 6mm diameter springs, and I believe they're about 10mm, a little bit more than that. But if you're interested in the dimensions, I can share that with you. And so by putting these springs in here, I noticed that they just provided just the right amount of pressure on the rails. And as you can see, the car moves, but not as freely, which is what you really wanted to do. So it's a very simple design. It's designed to address any terrain on the track that you would encounter. And here's a close-up of the sled. It's just two lengthwise slots for the cleaning material, and two rods that stick out that would basically help guide the sled along the contours of your track. Okay, so what about the cleaning materials that I'm planning to use, or the cleaning pads that I'm planning to use on these track cleaning cars? Well, I decided to use a simple high density foam, and these are freely available in your typical grocery stores, etc. And for example, I just have two brands here. I mean, please, by all means, I'm not endorsing these brands, but I'm just sharing with you what I use. This is a generic um, household cleaning high density sponge designed to clean walls, etc. And this one you've probably seen on commercials. Mr. Clean has the original that came out as a high density foam that's also used for cleaning walls and dirt off your cupboards and moldings, etc. So reason I chose this was twofold. One, it's easily available. It's extremely cost effective. Cost me a couple of bucks to get one of these, and the amount I'll be using on these sleds, it would last me a lifetime, right? Just for a couple of bucks here. So, taking this foam out, as you can see, I've done some, already cut a few pieces and used them, but all I really need is a small sliver of this. Now what I've done is I've designed this sled to fit the exact width of this foam. So I have to do very minimal cutting, because once I cut a piece off this, I know it's going to fit inside this slot. Okay, so let's just cut a quick little piece here. And you don't have to be accurate. It's just cleaning pads, so there's nothing scientific about this. There you go. And you got yourself two pads. Right? That's how simple it is. And these go in these slots. And you got yourself some really good cleaning pads. Now the reason I wanted to use these high density foam pads, because by nature their cleaning effectiveness for cleaning is amazing, because they were designed exactly for that. They were designed to clean dirt off your walls, etc., without damaging your surfaces. And so that's the purpose of actually using these. And I've tried them out and it's been extremely effective. The other piece of the design too is the reason I went with rectangular shape like this. One, it'll go along the length of the track, so it would actually clean a good surface area as you're moving back and forth. Secondly, once you used up one of these surfaces, you can actually flip it over and put it back into your sled again and use the other surface. Once that's being gunked up, you can flip it again and use the third surface. Flip it again and use the fourth surface. So basically, one sponge here will give you 4 different cleaning runs, or cleaning cycles in a single sponge. And you cannot get that with a commercially available pad, because from a commercially available cleaning car, you put a pad on there once and that's all you can use it for. You have to peel it off and put another one on. Whereas this, you can use it 4 times by rotating the pad. Okay, so I'm just going to insert one of these sponges in here. It's very, very quick and easy. Put it in there. There you go. You got one sponge in there. There you go. You got 2. And that's how quickly and easy you can put them in. And they just glide on the track. And the beauty about this is that once you've gone through a couple of cycles and you got a lot of gunk on this surface of the pad, you basically just use a toothpick or something, just push it out, flip the surface around to the next side, and put it back in. And you have a fresh surface again to clean your track with. So here, put the springs back on. Put the car on there. And you can see this thing pivoting back and forth as I move it back and forth. You can see it doing the little tilt, and you can that gives you indication it's actually rubbing against the track. And so I actually created a couple of cars. Now I got a second one here, and I can put it in this one that I've also made the holes in. And now I can have a second car that can run along with the first one. So perhaps I can put some chemical cleaners on the first one, and I can have some dry sponges in the second one. And therefore, as you have liquid clean the track, the one behind is now drying it up for you as you have it pulled by a locomotive. And of course, I was able to use the same size of car that came from the original Fleischmann track cleaner. So I used the fake load on that one, and you can use that on here and cover your spots, cover the rods. And I have another one of those fake loads and put it on this one here, and you got yourself a decent looking rolling stock that happens to be track cleaners, and they are very effective. And of course, if you have a 3D printer, you can actually make your own fake load. I just happen to have these, so I just put them on here. But if you have access to a 3D printer, that's a very simple task. Okay, so let's take this track cleaner, homemade track cleaner, and let's run it on the track and give it a shot. So again, here we are, fully assembled with the suspended sled and the two springs sitting in between the sled and the car. And I typically use electrical contact cleaner for cleaning track. Of course, plastic safe electrical contact cleaner, and I have a separate video on this as well, so you can take a look at that video on the do's and don'ts of cleaning your track. So the good thing about using these high density foam is that it's actually a good absorbent for the cleaning liquid, and it holds it pretty well in there. Okay, so I am going to spray some cleaning fluid on here, or some electrical contact cleaner. You can see it becomes dark in color as it's absorbed by the foam. And then we put on the track and give it a run. Oops, didn't latch. There we go. Just going to take you a close-up of the sled as it moves by. Okay, let me just move the camera here, and let's take a closer look as to how well this track cleaner worked. Now, I'm just going to bear with me as I uncouple this with one hand and hold the camera with the other. I want to make sure I can get a good close-up of the track cleaner car. A little bit tricky here. There we go. There we go. Okay. Wow, there you go. Look at all that dirt that got caught on these foam pads. As you can see, the ends seem to have a little bit more dirt This one here on the right seemed to have gotten a bit more dirt than the one on the left, but either way, they've both been pretty effective. Now, mind you, this is on a track that was cleaned last week because I was running the same car with the prototype sled that I had before out of wood, just testing it out to make sure that it was effective. And so there wasn't much dirt on this track to begin with, but it's amazing that much dirt got accumulated in a week or so. But either way, as you can see, very effective mechanism here, and the fact that you have a sled that's free floating suspension from the chassis or from the body, it can actually move the contours of your track and adjust to any imperfections of your track, especially at rail joiners, etc., etc. All right, let's just do a wipe here and see how it looks. Wow, that's clean. There's nothing on here. Wow, does a great job. And that's only with a few passes on the track with the locomotive. And the good thing about this is you can add a second cleaner car like what I showed you before there, with just some dry pads, and it will actually just dry out the wipe dry the rails after you got the cleaner on this one. All right, well, there you go. Simple, easy to make, effective, cost effective as well, because you can just make your own foam pads very quickly, as I showed you, and a very practical track cleaner. Well, I hope you found this video useful. If you have any thoughts or questions, please feel to put them in the comment section, and I'll be more than happy to address and respond. Thanks again, and take care.